Today I'll focus on a particular nexus of suspicion involving NGOs, volunteers, and the government. I'll explore how when Hindu scriptural ideas of the impulse to give and of disinterested giving intersect with contemporary notions of social responsibility and obligation, tensions manifest between an immediate impulse to end suffering and the social obligation to create a just society. And it's in this tension that we find the nexus of suspicion. I'd like to preface my talk with just stating the fact that in India today, religious donations confer no tax benefit to donors, unlike here, for example. And they're currently unregulated by the state. And I'll come back to this at the end of my talk because it's important. In an issue of a newsletter for NGOs in India called Accountable, a special issue was devoted to accountability in Hindu Daan. I use this example to illustrate that bringing concepts from Hindu scripture to the NGO world of Delhi is not an idea of my own. The newsletter first translated the Hindi word daan not into donation, but into gift or giving, and contrasted Hindu and Western ideas of giving. In the West, the newsletter explained, people remain attached to their donation. They remained interested in knowing how the money was used. In other words, they would like to get the satisfaction of having achieved the purpose of the donation. In Hinduism, in contrast, donors are required to detach themselves from the object that has been donated. Daan then requires tyag, or relinquishment of all proprietary rights in the property. This tyag cannot be achieved if we remain concerned with the outcome of daan. The newsletter explained, Hindu thought encourages a gradual detachment from the material world if one is to achieve moksha, or release from the painful cycle of birth and death. The act of giving is, therefore, an act of cutting off ties with the material world. It is an act of freedom. And herein is the dynamic tension between the freedom of the gift, which alludes to an eventual release from the material world, and the regulation of the gift. You've noticed so far, probably, that I've aggravated categories of charity, humanitarianism, and philanthropy. And I do this with analytical intent. In urban New Delhi, current conceptions of daan, which again translates as donation or giving, embrace the humanitarian objectives of charity and philanthropy as one. Classically and scripturally, daan is a disinterested gift, a gift without expectation of return. The Bhagavad Gita characterizes such a gift as being offered through desireless action, or nishkam karma. The quote that I'm going to give you in a minute comes from a commentary upon and translation of the Bhagavad Gita that was given to me by an informant in an interview. My informant said, after our discussion, you must take this book. Then you will understand its scriptural relevance. So this was a translation of the Gita. There should be no motive in charity, and there should be no aim, direct or indirect. Let those to whom you give be such that they cannot make any return to you. Just as when shouting toward the sky there's no reply, or nothing can be seen at the back of a mirror, or a ball when thrown on the water does not rebound in one's hand, or just as a wild bull is fed on grass, or an ungrateful person returns no obligation, charity should be without any idea of return. This is the supreme notion of charity. The inferior kind is that in where there's some other intention. It is like feeding a cow with the intention of getting milk, or sowing a seed with the intention of selling corn, or inviting relatives with the intention of getting presents, or sending sweets to friends expecting them to return them, or like working for others after they have paid the fees, or giving medical aid after charges have been paid. The gift at either end of the spectrum of impulse and obligation is problematic. There's a social danger if it's reduced to either pole. If the gift is left to its impulsive extreme, it has the potential to perpetuate inequality. For example, the wealthy can choose to support causes that benefit them, not those in greatest need, such as organizing charity bazaars that raise money for the poor but do not address the structural conditions that perpetuate poverty. In so doing, the wealthy, through their philanthropy, maintain the status quo and neither empower the poor nor promote social justice. But others argue that charitable and philanthropic endeavors answer a need, filling in where the state is unable to provide social services, often in spontaneous response to humanitarian crises. When the state is not involved in programs of social welfare, there's more pressure on philanthropy to solve social problems. Proponents of philanthropy argue that without it, given the declining role of state-sponsored welfare amidst global neoliberal economic trends, those in need will fall into even greater despair. The focus on long-term effects, or one could say social obligations of giving, sits at the other end of the spectrum from the impulse to give. For example, impulsive giving to beggars, like you saw in the slides, is not typically placed in the same category as giving to institutions such as NGOs, despite the fact that both forms of donation respond to human suffering. Religious philanthropy, defined here very broadly as a form of dawn, thus distinguishes itself from the legal context of social welfare with its correlative entitlements.